Hey guys, my name is Colin. Welcome to creating a file archiver completely from scratch in Java. This is part one, and we're going to be creating the backbone as well as a simple command line interface. Now, this is the second time I've been recording this video. I'm really bad with this still. Um, my screen was completely frozen for the entire first time I recorded this. So it's pretty nice. I have all of the code pretty much already ready, and I'm basically just going to be re-implementing that and explaining why I'm doing things. Yeah, so if I'm a little bit more brief with explanations, that's probably going to be why. Yeah, so let's talk about what a file archiver is, because that's probably what a lot of you are asking. File archivers aren't exactly pieces of software that we give too much recognition to. So a file archiver is basically any sort of program that takes multiple files and condenses them down into one. For example, a zip file, a WinRAR file, 7-zip file, a tar file, or what we're going to be implementing today, an AR file. Now, AR files are one of the most simple file archivers out there, because they basically are just text files. They are completely byte aligned, which means that we just read them in as characters, which is extremely nice. A lot of other files, such as zip, you're going to be dealing in binary, especially because it does compression. AR files do not do compression, so we're going to be left with bigger file sizes, but simpler ones that we can parse and do things with. So if we take a quick look at the format here, you're going to see it looks pretty straightforward. We have the file archive signature at the top here, just says exclamation mark arch. We have a file identifier, file name, um, a file modification timestamp. That was the last time the file was modified. Owner and group IDs, these are for Unix systems, and they pretty much aren't going to get any use outside of it. So for the time being, we're just going to basically leave these as if they're given, they're given. If not, we're going to initialize them to 0, as you can see that they've done here. File mode, this is also a Unix specific thing. So again, we're going to just roll with whatever they give us, or if they don't give us anything, we're going to use this 100/644 because it's basically like the default file mode in most Unix systems. The file size, and then a little ending character here, and then this is the data here. Maybe not so evident on the blue version thing, but you can see on the green and the yellow here, another file is included inside of this. So pretty simple and, well, pretty easy to implement. So let's get started. Now, I'm going to be using NetBeans for this tutorial. You can use any Java IDE you want. None of the things that we're going to be doing in here are going to be IDE specific, nor is it going to be specific to any version of Java. I believe this will work on basically any version of Java from Java version 1.0 up. So use whatever version of Java you want and also whatever IDE you want. Some of the other ones other than NetBeans would be something like IntelliJ or Emacs, Eclipse. I'm sorry, I don't use Java that much, and the first E thing I think of is Emacs. It's a text editor, by the way, for like C and Lisp and stuff. Um, yeah, so Eclipse and IntelliJ are other great IDEs. I've been using NetBeans for 10 years. I'm going to continue to be using NetBeans for the next 10 years. And I will leave a link in the description for where you can download it. And before we get this tutorial underway, I would just like to say this is going to be a sort of, you probably want to know the basics of Java before starting this. I'm going to be explaining everything we're doing and why we're doing it, but I'm not exactly going to be explaining why Java is Java and how Java constructs and classes and all of this necessarily work. So if this is your first Java tutorial like ever and you're expecting me to explain to you all of the intricacies of the language and such like that, I simply am not gonna have enough time to do that. So yeah, I recommend you go watch another tutorial, probably like a 1 hour Java bootcamp, and come back here and you'll probably be more than ready to get started. Anyway, let's get started. We're gonna create a new package here, or a new project, and we're just going to do a Java application. By the way, for the build system, I'm using Maven. You can use any build system again. It's not required that you use a single one. Just use whatever is default. The one that I'm posting to GitHub, because I'm going to be posting this code to GitHub, is going to be using Maven. So yeah, if you like Maven, just use Maven. If not, use something else. It's not important. And we're going to call this archiver. That folder already exists because I already did this tutorial already. So I'm just going to do temp YouTube and then just put it here since that's my working directory right now. For group ID, you put your website traditionally. So I own Bravadic.com, so I put com.bravadic. If I owned example.org, I would put org.example. And the package we're going to be working in is com.bravadic.archiver, or if I had any other thing like org.example.archiver. So let's click finish and get started. So it's automatically created this file here with our little main function and all of that, but we're not going to be using this for now because we're going to start to create these objects. Java is an object-oriented programming language, so let's take full advantage of it. So a Java object holds a bunch of information about the thing we're dealing with. In this case, it's going to be file entries and files. So we're going to want to create objects to hold all of the information for, well, these objects. So the first thing we're going to do is a file entry. So a file entry contains all of the information here. It contains an identifier, a modification timestamp, owner and group ID, file mode, file size, and it contains the data. So let's create that first. This is going to be our biggest object file, by the way. So trust me, it gets easier from here. First, we're going to want to create a new class. So we can come up here, right click, new class, and we're going to call this AR file entry. And basically, we're going to go down and we're going to create every single thing that I just said. So we're going to be using private for these because we don't want anything messing with it. Private basically says that only this class can modify these things. So I'm going to use private string name, private int mod for the modification timestamp, private int OID for owner ID, private int GID for group ID, private int mode for the mode, private int size for the size, and finally, we're going to want to create something to hold our actual file data. So I'm just going to be using a not a char array, a char array called data. So now we're going to want to create our constructor. This is going to be what actually, well, creates our object here. So to create a constructor, simply public and then the name of the class. So AR file entry. Now we're going to need to take in all this information. So we're going to say string name, int mod, int OID, int GID, int mode, int size. I can go on the next line, int size, and character array data. And we're just going to set it to everything here. So this dot name equals name, this dot mod equals mod, this dot OID equals OID, this dot GID equals GID, this dot mode equals mode, this dot size equals size, and finally this dot data equals data. So to give you guys a little time to catch up, if you are following along at home, basically what we've done here is we've just created an object that will store all this information. We're never going to be creating an AR file entry without all this information here. So basically, we're just adding it to this object that will hold on to everything. Now, the reason we'd want to do this is, well, twofold. We want to create something to hold on to our AR file, but we also really want something that's like easier to work with. So we basically condense all of this data into one piece of data, which is our AR file entry, which we take around. So now we're going to be creating setters and getters. Now, setters and getters are pretty much the core of Java. These are the things that set and get values that are inside of classes. So since these are private, we can't just say AR file entry .oid equals 105. You actually will have to set it through a method here. So let's go through and create all of our setters. So to do a setter, we do public void and then set. We'll do set name first. We're going to take in a name and we're just going to say this dot name equals name. Perfect, easy, right? All right, so we're going to copy and paste this for every single other type here. Also, ignore the horrible formatting. I don't know why NetBeans is doing this. It did this when I recorded the last tutorial as well, or the last version of this tutorial, I should say. But yeah, so these are all just going to follow the same thing. So we're going to say set name. Now it's going to be set modification timestamp. This dot mod equals mod. And we're going to take in int mod. And then set owner ID. Int OID. And we're going to say this dot OID equals OID. Set group ID. We're going to take in an int. We're going to call it GID. And we're going to say this dot GID equals GID. Next, we're going to do set mode. I'm going to take in an int. We're going to call it mode. And we're going to say this dot mode equals mode. Next, we are going to be taking in a size. So set size. We're going to say taking an int. It's going to be called size. I'm going to say this dot size. And finally, set data. We're going to take in a character array. That's what char stands for, if I didn't mention it already. And we're going to say this dot data equals data. Perfect. So that's our setters out of the way. Now we got to do our getters. So a setter sets the value here. You can see this dot name equals the name we're taking in here. So now a getter returns this dot name. So for example, public string get name, and we're going to return this dot name. So copy and paste this for all of the things here. Again, sorry about the formatting. No idea why NetBeans is doing this to me. Probably some setting that I just haven't configured. So get modification timestamp, get owner ID, get group ID, get mode, get size. Oh, no, I'm not one short. I counted correctly. Get data. So let's go through and actually make these work. So get name is already good, and we're going to want this to be an int because we're returning. Might as well just copy that because we're going to be using it a lot. Int, 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 int. OID, GID, MODE, SIZE, and this one's going to be character array for this data. So again, setters set the value here. For example, this dot name equals name, and a getter returns this dot name. So if we wanted to get the name of the file, for example, you just do that. Now we're actually going to add in a few helper methods, which will be helping us when we actually create the archiver and unarchiver themselves. So first, we're going to want to convert this to an entry. So like something that you would see in this. So for that, we're going to public string here, and I'm going to say to entry. Yeah, I should be following my own formatting rules. Now in to entry, we're going to be returning a string. But before we actually do that, I want to show you guys what an entry looks like. So pulling up my terminal here, you're going to see the archiver file that I'm working in right now, but also two files here, file 1 and file 2. These are test files I created. File 1 says hello world, and file 2 says goodbye world. If I wanted to convert these to an AR file, I use arq file.ar, the file name, and then file1.txt, file2.txt. Now we have file.ar, and if we view it in a text editor, you can see this. This is the AR file, basically. This is the curtain pulled away. You can see it follows the same format as laid out in Wikipedia. We have that magical ASCII string at the top to say, hey, this is an AR file. And then we have each file entry information. We basically want to write this. So you can see here that we have the name, the timestamp, all of that and such. So let's go ahead and make our entry here. We're going to be using string.format for this. which I really recommend looking into. It is an extremely powerful utility, if not extremely confusing one. So first, we're going to want 16 characters, as you can see down here, as the file identifier. You can see we pad the spaces on the right. For example, Debian binary doesn't take up the full 16 characters. So on the right, there is spaces. So we're going to be doing a negative 16s. That specifies a string that is 16 characters where we're going to pad to the right. Next, we're going to do negative 12d. This is a length of 12, and we're going to be using a decimal, so we put a d. Likewise, we do negative 6d, negative 6d for the owner group ID with both a length of 6. Next, we're going to be doing negative 8d for the file mode, and we're going to be doing negative 10d for the file size. Next, we're going to put the ending character, which is the grave, and a new line, and then we're going to be putting %s for our file data. Now, format's going to complain because we haven't actually given it what to format. It needs a bunch of parameters here. So the first thing is going to be this.name. Next is going to be this.mod, following the table on Wikipedia here. Then we're going to be doing this.oid, this.gid, this.mode, this.size, and finally, we're going to be doing this.data. But you'll notice it says array instance passed as parameter to a formatter function. That won't do, so we're going to actually have to convert data into a string for this. Luckily, Java allows us to do this with string.value of, like this, which will allow us to convert this into data, or a string that we can use, not data. It's already data. So now we can create that entry. And next, we're actually going to make it want to write to a file. So I'm going to say public file to file. And I'm going to say this, file output equals new file. And we're going to put this.name. Next, we're going to want to make a file writer. So file writer fw equals new file writer. And we're just going to put the output file here. We're going to say fw dot write this dot data, just like that. Now close it, just like that, and boom. So you're going to get these red underlines here. We need to import java.io.file. In NetBeans, you can hold Alt and hit Enter and automatically import them like this. Or you can just go to the top of the file here and type import java.io.file or java.io.file writer. We're also going to get this underline here for an IO exception. For now, Alt Enter. I didn't mean to do that. Or I did mean to do that, but I don't know why it didn't just let me. Yeah, okay. Add a throws clause here. And there we go. Are you kidding me? You can find it. I literally imported you, man. Come on. File writer's been imported. I don't know. It'll take a little time to catch up, I guess. So now we have this file here, which is going to be our main file, really. But we don't have anything to deal with the AR files themselves. We can load an entry, but that isn't going to be really useful when we're not reading it from a file. So let's create a new class here, and we're going to call it AR file. Now in AR file, we're going to contain basically everything we need to contain for reading from a file and adding entries, but also for creating files and adding new files. So this is important because we're not only going to be, hold up, my battery is dying on my laptop really fast. Let me plug that in. Sorry that I just noticed that. Pause the tutorial for 5 seconds. Yeah, that's awkward. Who would have knew that recording absolutely kills your battery? Anyway, so the AR file class here is going to contain everything we need to not just write an AR file, but also add files to it, read files from it, basically the whole works. So let's get started. First things first, we're going to need to create our constructors. So let's create a AR file that we're creating from scratch. And next, an AR file that we're going to be making from a file. Notice you can have multiple constructors, and the difference is just going to be if we pass a string to this one, it'll use that constructor. Now we're going to want something that holds on to all of our file entries. So we're going to be using an array list for that. So I'm just going to put array list here. We're going to say AR file entry, and we're just going to call this entries. This is going to be a list that holds all of our entries in our thing. So here, let's just initialize it to null because we're not going to have any entries. And here, we're not going to have any entries at this time. So equals new array list, like that. So now if we were to create our own AR file, even if we passed it a string, we're not going to see anything in there because, well, we actually haven't done any logic to load file entries in yet. So we're going to have to write a whole lot of code to do that. Isn't that fun? Anyway, let's get started on that. So first, we're going to want to open that file that we passed to it. So I'm going to call this AR, file AR equals new file, and we're just going to load file. Also make sure to import file. And we're going to be using a buffered reader. Now, a buffered reader basically allows us to read from this file a whole lot easier than if we were using a file reader. So I'm going to say buffered reader br equals new buffered reader, and it takes a file reader. So we're going to put that in here, and the file reader takes our file. So import all of these, and also we're going to add a throws clause for that. So just right up here, throws file exception, or file not found exception. Don't worry, we're going to be coming back and adding try catches for all of that in our command line interface, but there's no use to be doing that in this because, well, this is more or less a library, so we can't really be doing that. So first things first, we're actually going to be wanting to make sure this is actually an archive file and not something else. So I'm going to say string magic equals br.readline. Just a side note, we're able to use read line because if you notice, the archive signature ends with a new line, and so does the file identification block, which is pretty sick, meaning we can just use read line for all this. If you don't believe me, if we check here, you can see these are all on new lines. So read line's also going to complain. We can throw the exception here, so just add a throws to IO exception as well. So now we want to check if magic.equals exclamation mark arch, then we want to continue on. Otherwise, we want to throw our own exception. File is not an archive, or not an AR file. It could very well be an archive, just a different format that we don't know. And also add a throws for that one. So now if we do have exclamation mark arch, then, well, we have our archive file. So now we need to start getting information from it. So I'm going to create a string here called string info. And I'm going to say while info equals br.readline does not equal null. I keep writing in uppercase because that's how you do it in C, which basically what this is going to do is it's going to set info to the result of br.readline, and it's going to make sure it's not null. If br.readline is null, we've reached the end of the file and can't read anymore. So now we have our information. Now we need to do something with it. So we're going to basically go ahead and get substrings from this information. If you'll remember, we've read the entire line. So we have this in our memory. So what we really want to do is we want to cut out this substring here, this substring here, this substring here, this substring here, this one here, so on and so forth. Basically, we're cutting out the information we need. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to create a string here. We're going to call this name. We're going to say it's equal to info dot substring. Now Java's substring sucks. I hate it so much. Instead of being offset and length, it's beginning index and ending index. So on this table here on the Wikipedia page, we can use the offset verbatim. However, length will have to be offset plus length. Kind of blows, but oh well. So we're going to say info.substring 0, then 0 plus 16. Next, we're going to want to get our mod. So we're going to say int mod equals info.substring 16 and then 12 plus 16, or 16 plus 12, let's just do. But you'll notice we're going to get a big red thing because incompatible types, string cannot be converted to int. Yeah, we're getting a substring, so it's returning a string. So we're going to want to just put integer.parseInt in front of that, which will basically just tell Java to convert that string into an integer. So yeah, let's just continue on. We're going to want to do int OID equals integer.parseInt info.substring. And this time it's going to be 28 and 28 plus 6. Int GID equals integer.parse int info.substring. And here we're going to be doing 34 and 34 plus 6. Int mode equals integer.parse int info.substring. And we're going to be doing 40 and then 40 plus 8. Int size equals integer.parse int info.substring 48. And we're going to be doing 48 plus 10. And finally, we're going to be getting that ending character. So for that, we can just do equals info.substring 58, and that's going to read to the end of this string. Anyway, we have all of the information here. Now let's make sure that we're actually at the end like we think we should be. Because remember, immediately after this grave, we're going to be reading file information. So we don't want to be trying to convert this into file data or file information here. We're going to be actually reading the file data. Likewise, if we haven't reached this, let's say we're still somewhere in here, this is a malformed archive file, so we probably don't want to be dealing with it. So I'm just going to say if end.equals that grave, then we can go. Otherwise, throw new exception expected end of header, because that's what we expected. All right, so now everything is perfect. We have basically, we've gotten to this point. Now we're just reading in data. So what's nice is we know exactly how much data to read in. We've read its file size already. So we're just going to say character array data equals new character array, and we're going to put our size in here. This will create a character array that is perfectly sized to our data. So next, we're just going to type br.read data, and it will read literally everything. Now, we're going to add a file entry to it. So I'm going to say AR file entry. I'm going to say FE equals new AR file entry. And in here, we're basically just going to fill this out with the stuff we already have. Name, mod, OID, GID, mode, size, data, just like that. See why it's useful to create an object? Who would want to carry all of this stuff around? So now that we have that file entry made, let's add it to our entries. So to do that, just entries.addFE, just like that. And of course, we can close our buffered reader outside of the while loop. So that ends right here. So just do br.close. It's always good practice to close buffered readers and buffered writers. You don't necessarily need to do it for buffered readers, but it's good practice, I guess. So now with this, we've been able to read in an archive file and also get all of the entries from it. So let's go ahead and make a little helper function down here to do something cool. So I'm going to say public void print files. Again, I should be following my own style guidelines. We're basically just going to go through entries here. So for each AR file entry E in entries, we're going to be doing system.out.println e.getName. All right, perfect. So now let's head on back to Archiver here and let's create our AR file. So I'm going to say AR file, AR equals new AR file, and I'm going to be using this file that I created here, this file.ar. It'll be in the GitHub repository, which is going to be linked in the description below, so you can feel free to test with this exact same file here. So I'm going to say /temp/YouTube/file.ar. Of course, replace this with whatever path your file is in. And it's going to throw an exception, so we're just going to put throws up there. And it's going to ar.printfiles. Now, if we run it here, we're going to get a build error. Something here is missing its return. Oh, we don't need to do there. You can just do void there. Oh, here's another error. This one is a bit more important. This one isn't just me making a typo. So notice it says number format exception for string this. This is coming from our integer.parse. Now, this looks like a number. It is a number. But you can see here we have these two white spaces at the end. These are not okay, and Java does not know how to convert that into a number. So we're going to need to go through and we're going to need to get rid of those. So basically to all of our substrings here, just add .trim. This will remove white space from the beginning and the end of the file, which, as you can see from the diagram on Wikipedia, there is going to be a lot of white space here if the thing doesn't fill up the massive amount of space that it has, for example. So yeah, let's trim it just to make sure that we get only what we want. And now run it, and you can see here we list file 1 and file 2. So what this means is both file 1 and file 2 are actually being read into memory. So we now have a representation of them in memory, which is pretty sick. But ultimately somewhat useful, or somewhat useless, sorry, because, well, we can read it and we can print the names of the files, but we can't actually get the files out of it yet, nor can we create an AR file from scratch. So let's actually create the AR file from scratch next and add entries to it. So believe it or not, this is all we need for this constructor. It's just entries.array new array list thing here. Entries equals new array list. But we're going to want to be able to add files to an opened archive that we have in memory here. So let's say public void add file. We're going to take in a string for the file name. So this is where it's going to get a little bit more complicated, and also where we're going to be, well, blatantly disregarding a lot of information. So first, we're going to be opening a file to add. So simple as that, file add equals new file name. And then we're going to want to get a buffered reader. Buffered reader br equals new buffered reader, new file reader, and we're just going to be passing in the file here. So add. We're going to throw an exception as well, file not found exception. And here we're basically just going to be getting the size of the file. Now, with any luck, the file should be add.length here. That should hopefully return our size. So int size equals. And also we're going to want to get our name here. So string name equals add.getName. Perfect. What are you complaining about? Oh, yeah. It's going to be converting long to int because technically files can be larger than the maximum value that can be stored in an int. But the maximum file size for any file in an AR file is 10 gigabytes. So we're not really going to have to be dealing with that too much. 10 gigabytes can cleanly fit within an int, so that's what we're going to be doing. Anyway, let's continue. So next we're going to want to create our, actually I'm just thinking about it. I don't know if 10 gigabytes can cleanly fit into an int. I think 4 gigabytes might be the upper limit of int, but we don't care. I'm not changing that. So now we're going to be doing our AR file entry here. Actually, no, we're not. We need the data first. So buffered reader dot read and data. But notice we haven't created our data thing yet because I'm getting ahead of myself. So character array data equals new character array. And we have our size, so we can just put that here. Read our data, close the buffered reader. Also add a throws exception for that. And we're going to add a new file entry here. So AR file entry, FE equals new AR file entry. So we're going to take in name. For the modification timestamp, we're going to put 0. This will mean that it was modified on January 1st, 1970. Obviously not true, but also I don't know if Java has a cross-platform way to get the Unix timestamp, so we're just going to say 0 for this. Likewise, 0 and 0 for mode and group, or group and owner IDs. Mode is going to be 100.644. This is a fairly standard group, very standard mode that basically lets you read, write, but not execute on Linux. The file size, and of course data. And now we're just going to add entries.add fe, like that. Perfect. So throw that file exception there and throw another one, I think. Okay, it just won't go away, so I'm just adding multiple IO exceptions. That doesn't need to be there. Just a case of NetBeans not updating fast enough. Oh, and I accidentally added that little character there. So yeah, now we can actually add files. So let's pull up here and let's create another file. So file3.txt. And for this, I'm just going to say, hello, goodbye, just like that. So now let's pop on over to archiver.java. When we run it, it should still work and print file1 and file2. Now let's do ar.addFile. I'm going to say /temp/YouTube /file3.txt. And now we're going to print them out again. So now when we run it, you're going to see at first we just print out file1, file2. Now we're adding file3 into the mix. Pretty sick. We've basically been able to add a file from memory into our AR file. So now let's go back to AR file and continue to work on it. Adding files are cool and all, but if we can't actually output this archive file to a real file, then we're going to have some issues here. So let's go ahead and make a toFile command here. So public void toFile. We're going to take in the name of the file, so fname. And let's get started. So file out equals new file, and we're going to say fname. This is just going to go ahead and create this new output file or open it if it already exists. And then we're going to say file writer fw equals new file writer out. So we're basically just creating a file writer here to write to our file, shocker. And we're also going to need to throw the exceptions. So now we're going to create our buffer. Basically, again, an AR file is this big text file. So we're going to want to create a string to hold all this information. So string buffer, and we're going to say it equals our ASCII magic number at the top, our magic string. So arch, and then a new line. So now we're basically going to loop through every single file entry. So for every AR file entry, E in entries, we're going to go through and we're basically just going to say buffer, and we're going to append e.toEntry. See, it was useful we wrote that earlier. And now we're going to write buffer. And now we're going to close. We can actually do this a lot better. And actually I'm going to do it better. Last time I did this with a string buffer, but I'm going to go ahead and use the buffered reader or buffered writer's ability to write like this. Go ahead and just do this. The other thing will work just fine if you really just don't want to change up your code like this. This will just make it slightly more efficient, I guess, use less memory. So now we've basically written out this file. So now that we've added this file in, so again, we run it, and you can see we've basically just added file 3 into the mix. Now let's write it to a file. So I'm going to say ar.to file, and I'm going to put it in temp YouTube other.ar. Run here. And if we check, you can now see we have other.ar. Pulling it up, you can see it looks exactly like an AR file. And if we move it into a testing directory here, and we were to unarchive it with ARX, you'll notice it unarchives just fine. And we can even read file 3 just perfectly. So now we can add files and we can extract to, or we can archive everything to a file. Now let's go ahead and, well, make it so we can extract all of our files from it. This is going to be pretty easy because we already have a to-file command inside of our AR file entry. So basically all we're going to be needing to do is go through and write all of those to their respective files. So public void unarchive. I'm going to say for AR file entry E in entries. We're going to go ahead and just do e.toFile. All we need to do, and this one, again, we're going to throw an IO exception. So yeah, now let's go ahead and do ar.unarchive here. Now when we run it, it should run just fine. But now if we go into the archiver folder, you'll see we have now file 1, file 2, and file 3. Or I did those in the wrong order. So perfect. We basically have just made an archive, or opened an archive, added a file, and then unarchived it. And likewise, if we just remove the string here, stop opening the archive, it'll create an empty archive, add file 3 to it, and unarchive it here. So if we were to take a look, for example, at other.ar, or sorry, YouTube, vim other.ar, you'll see now it only has file 3 in it. Perfect, exactly what we want. But this isn't too useful if we have to constantly open the code and make a bunch of changes just to change what we're doing. So let's go ahead and make a very simple command line interface for this. So to begin, we're going to want to check our command line arguments. We also can remove this because we're going to add error checking. So args is your command line arguments. For example, if we run java.-jar file.jar and then add like ASDF JKL semicolon, ASDF and JKL semicolon are actually passed to the main function of the jar here. So we're going to be using these. So first thing, we want to check if our length is greater than or equal to 2, because my envisioned use for this is going to be archiver create our archive file here, so like file.ar, and then all the files we want to put in it. Or archiver list file.ar, and that will list all the files in our archive, or an archiver unarchive, and then our file, and that will expand our archive here. So all of these are going to take in 2 arguments at least. So here it takes in 2 arguments and then an infinite amount here. This one takes in 2 arguments and this one takes in 2 arguments. So you want to make sure it's greater than or equal to 2. Otherwise, we want to show information for how to use this. And our information is basically what we just wrote up here. So we're going to say system.out.println usage, and then system.out.println line, and I'm just going to paste this here. Get rid of the little comments. And it already adds the new lines for me. That's pretty nice of you, NetBeans. So now if we just run it from the IDE here, you're going to see it's just going to give us the usage. So we're no longer creating any files or anything like that. So now we're entirely driven on the command line. So let's get to it. First, let's create our, well, create function here. So we can say if args 0 dot equals create. So if our first argument equals create, so right here, we're going to want to do something about that and create our file. So first, our args1 is going to be our file name right here. And then args2 and onward are going to be our extra files. So let's just go ahead and, well, create our files here. So AR file, AR equals new AR file. Since we're creating it, it's going to be completely empty. And now we're going to go through int x equals 2. Like I said, we're going to start at AR, or args equals 2. X less than args.length x plus plus to go through and go to each one. And we're just simply going to ar.add file args x. Perfect. And now ar.write or ar.toFile, and we're going to use the file name here in args1, just like that. Now you'll notice we're going to have these little red underlines here, and that's because we're actually going to need to surround this in a try catch. So a try catch basically tries something, and if it can't do it, it'll throw an exception. So I'm going to surround this one in a try catch, and this one in a try catch. So if we can't add the file, I'm going to say system.out.println cannot add file, and then I'm just going to say args x here. And if we get to here, we're just going to say system.out.println cannot write to file and say args1, just like that. Perfect. So that is our creation of our archive. Next, let's do the list. This one's going to be quite simple. Equals list. Basically, all we're going to do is open the archive. So AR file, AR equals new, AR file, and we're going to take args1 in here since we want the file here. So that's args1. This one also needs to be surrounded with try catch, which basically we're just going to say could not open AR file here. And we're going to put args1. So now if we have it open, we just do ar.print files. Simple as that. And finally, we're going to do args0.equals unarchive. Now, here we're going to open the file again. AR equals new AR file, args1. We're going to again surround that in a try catch. Oh, didn't mean to throw the exception there, to put it in a try catch. System.out.println could not open file plus args1. Perfect. And now we're just going to do ar.unarchive, just like that. So there we go. This is our file archiver. Now, before we actually finish this, there is one thing we're going to need to do. Now, Maven, the build system I'm working with, will not by default produce a working jar for some reason. I've had this issue with it forever, so we're just going to come into pom.xml and project files here. Now, if you're not using Maven, you do not need to worry about this. If you can't run the jar file that it creates, just look it up on the internet. There's probably some information about it. So, but if you are using Maven, go into project files here in NetBeans and then into the pom.xml. We're going to add a new tag here, build. And in build, we're going to add plugins. And in plugins, we're going to add plugin. And here we're going to say group ID is going to be org.apache.maven.plugin. plugins like that. We're going to say our artifact ID is going to be maven-jar-plugin. We're going to say configuration here. We're going to want our archive. So archive. This is not the archive we're working with, by the way. Different type of archive. Manifest. And finally, we're going to add class path. Class path. Man, that is a hard thing to say when you're not really thinking about it. So we're going to add class path true, and finally main class. And that's going to be com.robotic.archiver.archiver. Again, change that to whatever you want. So we're going to end manifest. We're going to end configuration. And there we go. So just to reiterate, you have to add this in to make it so it builds a working jar file. Kind of stupid, but I don't know, there's probably a good reason for it. So with our code here in Archiver, if we run it again, you're going to see it's going to say usage. But let's go up to here and click build. And you're going to see it's created this archiver.jar in my folder. If we run, it's going to be in target, sorry. So now if we run archiver.jar, you're going to get the usage. So let's do temp YouTube file.ar, and let's list from it. And you can see it lists file 1 and file 2. So let's actually create, I'm going to move the archiver here to temp YouTube. So let's go back into our test directory. So I'm going to move the archiver into here. So I'm going to remove other.ar, and I'm going to say I want to create an archive of file 1, file 2, and file 3. So I'm going to say create file.ar, file1.txt, file2.txt, file3.txt. Boom. Now you can see we have file.ar. It is a standard AR file. And let's remove all of the txt files here and unarchive it with the official AR unarchiving utility. So we can use arx file.ar, and boom, file 1, 2, and 3 are back, and their contents are unchanged. Next, let's go ahead and actually create a archive with the archiver. So archive q, file 1, file 2, and file 3. And we're going to go ahead and call... Ooh, it does not like when I hold shift. I'm used to a different shell that lets me do that. And we're going to call this file.ar. You can see it says creating file archive, file.ar. File.ar is just doing its thing here. Java jar archiver, and let's say we're going to unarchive it, remove all the text files really fast. Java-jar archiver unarchive file.ar, and boom, you can see all of our files are back and doing their thing. So yeah, we've created an archiver completely from scratch in Java. Thank you guys so much for watching. If any part of this video didn't make sense to you, if you want me to clarify something, or if I was going too fast, because I know I was going extremely fast because I had already recorded this about an hour ago, and this isn't exactly a short video to make, so I'm very sorry if I went way too fast. But if there's anything you need help with, if you're getting errors and you don't know why, if you can't figure out how to make a buildable jar file, please leave a comment down in the comments, and, well, I will try my best to get back to you. I read pretty much every comment, so I'll try and help you out the best I can. Otherwise, if you have any questions about what we did, theory questions, anything related to Java in general, you can also ask it, and I'll do my best to answer your question, even if it's really weird. Likewise, if you want to get the code, check the description below. The code is the exact code that I just wrote here. So if you run it through NetBeans 17, it's pretty much guaranteed to work. And if you're running into issues, leave a comment, but it's probably an environment issue from your computer rather than a code issue. As I said, down in the description, GitHub. You can get the code from it if you don't want to follow along with this tutorial or you want a specific part of it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. First tutorial down, I guess. If there was anything I did bad or did good in general, please leave it in the comments. I'm really curious to hear. If you like the format, leave it in the comments. If you want me to change something, leave it in the comments. Basically, just leave a comment telling me what you thought of this video, or if you need any help or anything like that. But I guess without further ado, my name's Colin. This has been how to create a file archiving program from scratch in Java. So, peace. See you in the next one.